You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour on the Vets on Media Network.
Good morning, Arizona, and welcome to our visitors and our guests from around the globe. It's 1700 Greenwich Mean Time. My name is Joe Brett, and this is the Veterans Heritage Hour. And I have a great show, and we have a great show for you today. This is a feel-good show. This is the sound of victory, I think. This is a tribute to the Korean War veterans. And my guests today, who I'll introduce in a minute, were born in Korea, and their families made heroic escapes, I guess you would say, from what would have been North Korea or a totalitarian regime. And had not been for the Korean soldiers, our Korean veterans, all of Korea would have been like we now know what the evil regime is in North Korea. So setting the stage for this, just a shout out to Prescott, Arizona. The evil empire, the dark side of humanity has reached Arizona today, when with the news of the death of Kayla Mueller. And there was just a note published in the paper of her letter, and her idealism was just palpable. You know, what a great young woman she was, and what a tribute she is to the generation of which she's a member and a leader. And also we have to think about Malala on the Islamic side, who has now won a Nobel Peace Prize for her efforts in combating the evilness that we now know is manifest in ISIS and all the craziness that's going on. You can't even call that a religion. I don't know what it is, but it's certainly sinister, dark, and evil. And it's touched our lives today. And so there's no even better moment now than to reflect back on when American forces were for the good in the world. And joining me today to celebrate our Korean War veterans is a woman who has dedicated her current life to honoring those soldiers who gave her freedom. Susan Key. She is in the process of writing a book, and she's met many, many Korean War veterans and has much to say on their behalf. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning, Joe. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much for being here. And joining her is Dr. Sung Lee, another Korean American who has much to offer. He is Korea's gift to current soldiers, I think, and you'll hear more about him later. Good morning, Dr. Lee.
Good morning, Joe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us. As we do in each show, we think we have a history show here that teachers and students and others can download at a future time and use in a history class and or any other type of class, civil affairs, etc., geography. But we think that in setting the tone, Richard Neustadt, a great historian, wrote a book called Thinking in Time and taught a course of the same name. So let's think in time. Let's go back to Korea before World War II and actually before the Korean War. Susan, can you just kind of...
Sure. I'll give a real brief overview.
Sure.
So in 1910 is when the Japanese forcibly annexed Korea and took the territory. So Korea was enslaved to Japan from 1910 through all of World War II.
Okay.
It is only when the Japanese surrendered to the United States that Korea was freed. So August 15, 1945 was the day that they signed the surrender, and that is the day of our independence in Korea.
Okay.
So for almost 50 years, Korea was enslaved to Japan, and Japan took a lot of the resources from Korea to support its war effort.
So that was imperialism. Japan,
Yes.
that's the way imperialism worked by any country, the British and India and the Japanese imperial command of the Southeast Asia, et cetera. That was why they were there, is to exploit their resources.
Right. So after World War II ended, the United States took the south portion, south of the 38th parallel, to kind of stabilize the country, set up a democratic government, and hopefully to turn it back over to the people. The Soviet Union was given the north of the 38th parallel. So essentially after the war, North was given to Soviet Union and the South was given to the Americans to temporarily get it stabilized and then turn it back.
And hopefully there was going to be elections at some point in
Right,
time.
there were supposed to be. And
So-
of course, the Soviet Union had other ideas, and they put in a puppet regime of a communist named Kim Il-sung. And
Is he a direct descendant of the current Kims that are the current ills
he is the
that are there?
ancestor. He is the first of the Kim dynasty.
Okay.
So Kim Il-sung was the first,
Uh-huh.
then Kim Jong-il, and then Kim Jong-un is the
Yeah.
current. So he was the first. And he was the one set up by the Russians to establish a communist regime.
So we have to go back to Yalta probably when Churchill and Stalin and Roosevelt cut up the empire, cut up the world, really, who was going to be in the Soviet influence and who was going to be in the Western influence, if you will. And Russian and the communists got North Vietnam, maybe, or they thought, and North Korea as a result of the behind-the-scenes bargaining. And that's how there was a North and South instead of, that's why Korea wasn't united at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we then, the United States was backing
Syngman Rhee, and he was
Rhee.
a Princeton-educated, very Americanized future politician. And so he went back to Korea. He was elected as the first president. And, you know, both sides, North Korea and South Korea, both wanted unification. And because Syngman Rhee, which is the South Korean president, wanted to reunite forcibly, he wanted to invade the North. So
Oh, he did. I didn't know
he
that.
did. So eventually the Americans were very concerned about that. And so that was part of the reason why the military was downsized in South Korea. So on the eve of June 25th, 1950, which was the start of the Korean War, the American forces were very minimal presence in South Korea. And I think that was part of the reasons why they invaded. The North invaded the South because they knew that we didn't have much of a presence. The Americans didn't have much of a presence in South Korea at that time because they didn't want to encourage South Korea to invade the North. So that's kind of how
that's
it all
how
came
it's set
about.
up. And so
Yes.
there was this time then the North Korean army then pushed into South Korea.
Yes, and
And
they
that-
invaded on June 25th, 1950. So this year is the 65th anniversary of the start of the Korean War.
So in that time period, where were your parents and where were your, what was going on in your family tree, so to
Right. My
speak?
mom was about 9, 10 years old, and she was in Seoul. She was born in Seoul.
Mhm.
And when the war broke out, she, like everybody else, fled south. And she and her family fled south to a place called Pyeongtaek.
Uh-huh.
And they ended up taking over an abandoned farm of a distant uncle. And one thing she did tell me is how they lived through the war was that they would stay underground in an underground cellar during the day when all the bombings were taking place. And at night, they would come out of the cellar, underground cellar, and, you know, eat a little something and hide under blankets and not even use a candle because they didn't want to look like anyone was living there. So they left all the doors open, make it look like it was abandoned. And that's kind of how they lived the, you know, duration of the war.
Wow.
My dad, on the other hand, is from North Korea. He and his family had fled North Korea just before the war started. So they were lucky enough to get down to the South. And just like any young man, he was recruited into the ROK Army. And from what I've heard from my father, he did learn English somewhere along the way. I'm not sure how that happened, but I guess he helped interpret and was fighting alongside U.S. Army. So that was his story of how he lived through the war.
And where did he meet your mom?
I'm not exactly sure. I don't think I ever asked. I think it was in Seoul after the war.
Okay.
And I was born about 13 years after the war. And of course, none of this would be possible without our American veterans who came to save Korea.
I hear you.
So we have such a debt of gratitude to America and its brave young men who came to a country nobody even knew about or for the most part didn't even care about.
And looking over my shoulder right now, you can't see for those who are listening, but for those who might have the Skype camera, over my shoulder is my dear friend John Woodward. And he's pictured here on the wall, looking over me as he has for these last 20 some odd years. He's a dear friend I met in Arizona, but he's manning the 30 caliber machine gun with the 5th Cavalry Regiment with the 1st Cavalry Division in Korea. And he's still not warm. He's down in Tucson and he still can't get warm from those cold days in Korea. So I love him
Right.
dearly and I hope he's listening in. This show's for you, John. Dr. Lee, how about your family? Where were they during this time period?
So my father was actually, both my mother and father were in Seoul at that time, and they were both about 4 to 5 years old. And I'll just tell you one anecdote. You know, Joe, I'm really so appreciative that you're bringing up this history, because as much as I knew, of course, that my parents had lived through that, they never evinced any sense of scar or hardship from that time in their lives. And so I have to say, I never really thought much about it. And frankly, I didn't really even ask them much about that. So, you know, after we met last week, Joe, I called my father and I said to him, so Dad, so what was it like? What were you doing? What happened in 1950? You were 5 years old. He couldn't even remember how old he was at the time. He's even kind of blocked it out. But then he told me, he said, yes, I was about 5 years old. And he just said how horrified he was, because as you can imagine, he would remember night after night, just all this artillery fire and the sky just being lit up in red. And it was horrifying to him. And one of his stark memories of that time was when he was with his mother, and his own father was then at that time in his early 30s. And so he was, I suppose, too old to have been conscripted for the Korean War efforts. He was hiding from the North Korean forces because, as Susan was saying, you know, if they found you, you know, they would just take you and you become a soldier in the army. So he was up in the ceiling of their house. So my father has this very vivid memory of, you know, these North Korean soldiers just coming to their house and demanding to know where, you know, where the father of the house was. And of course, you know, his mother, my grandmother, just saying nothing and saying, no, I don't know where he is. And he's actually up hiding in the ceiling. So that was really a hard time, clearly. But he was actually very fortunate too, because his own situation was such that his father had actually worked for the U.S. forces, right, as a contractor. And he was part of a kind of, I guess, this certain generation or certain population of Koreans who had certain opportunities in that they worked with the Americans. And so he spoke good English. He'd actually gone to university, to one of Korea's few universities at that time. So his own father had a chance to kind of do some things for himself, so to speak. So what my father actually vividly also recalls to me is that he actually was able to drive in a car that they owned from Seoul to Busan, which was where they fled to when
The
that
southern part,
yes,
the Busan perimeter, I guess.
Exactly, the port city. And so he was very fortunate. He was among the few lucky ones that, you know, didn't have to travel as refugees to escape, you know, the invading North. So so that was a very kind of transitional point in their history when, of course, everything changed and their whole life got turned upside down. But it's really a part of the history that it's really so different from what Korea knows today, and certainly what most Korean Americans can sort of relate to.
Sure.
That I feel so touched and moved to have a chance to sit here and talk to you, Joe, about this in this kind of a context, with a kind of a history that's both brought up in American soil, but clearly from other roots from a different land as well, as you suggest.
And I know your dad became a physician.
That's right.
And he served in Vietnam with the ROC forces in Vietnam.
That's right.
Isn't that something?
That's right. So I actually asked him about that too, because I knew he had done that, but I was always curious. I hadn't asked him much about that experience. And so he shared with me that, yes, in 1970, he spent a year in Vietnam. So in Korea, as folks may or may not know, military service is mandatory for all men, 2 to 3 years. And he was a military officer, a medical military officer, because he'd gone to medical school. So they typically had a little bit different treatment than most people in the military. But he kind of drew an unlucky straw, so to speak. And for whatever variety of reasons, he started telling me some of the reasons, but I won't go into that. Yeah. He drew some tough assignments. His first year, he was at the DMZ and just essentially isolated, you know, there.
I might have met him. That's where I was in 1970.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, isn't that something?
That is fascinating.
That isn't that something? We had a little clinic there, but there was a hospital in
kidding.
Quang Tri. He may have been there.
That is amazing. I'll have to ask him exactly where he was.
Yes.
So his first year he was at the DMZ, although actually that may have been 69 because he was in Vietnam then in 70.
I was 69 and 70 up in the DMZ.
All
so who
right, there
knows?
we go. And
I don't remember the rock forces, quite frankly, but the rock forces, my friend David Lucere just joined us, Green Beret and contractor in Iraq and Afghanistan, but he also was in Vietnam around that time. And the rock forces, no one fooled with the Korean forces. They were tough. They had a reputation for that among the Americans and among the Australians, and everyone who said, wow, stay away from those guys. You know, they are tough. So the forces of the Korean army was molded into some force. And I guess it has to be because their enemy, their adversaries are the North Koreans, who are otherworldly when it comes to evil. So isn't that incredible? So we're got 5 minutes left, the Birdman's telling me. So where your family then, you have a great story. Your family also became involved with the Americans as well. Your dad was quite an entrepreneurial minded fellow.
Right. So after the war, there wasn't a whole lot of things you can do. And I think one of the things he thought about is a great presence of U.S. military and the need they had for transportation. So him having fluent knowledge of Japanese because of the Japanese occupation of Korea, he thought, I'll bring Honda motorcycles to Korea and sell them to the GIs. And so that's what he did after the war. And he did quite well. And it was in 1975, though, that we decided to leave Korea for various reasons. And coming over to America was really exciting for me. I guess the only thing I was thinking about on the plane here before we landed in LA was Mickey Mouse and ice cream. That was really all I was thinking about as a 9-year-old. Really.
Well, those are wonderful options, right? If you're a 9-year-old kid.
And those are truly American, iconic things, are they not? Ice cream
and you smile just thinking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, where else would you think?
I still think those are the greatest things. And so we settled in Orange County, California, and my parents were very focused on getting us assimilated as quickly as possible. To the point where they told us, don't even speak Korean, you're American now. And so it was quieter in our household until
But it was work, English. It was work. It was school, school.
Yes.
I mean, the Korean work ethic is wonderfully recognized here as an immigrant group of your countrymen came here. They are noted for
so my parents
work ethic and
started their first
education.
Business, which was a donut shop.
You did?
In Garden Grove, my parents. I started a donut shop.
Nice.
It didn't do very well. It ended up failing. But they worked very hard to start a new life. We obviously focused on studying and doing well in school, and I think we did. And so I went on to UCLA, and my lucky break was being hired by IBM right out of college, and that started my career.
But you had a political science degree. How did you get into IBM stuff?
Well, I had a political science degree because LA law was really popular at the time. I wanted to be an attorney. But then I realized most attorneys are really miserable, So I thought, I don't think I want to be that unhappy with my life.
The opinions of our guests are not necessarily the opinions of the show. I don't want to get sued.
Well,
Birdman, I want to keep you out of jail, brother.
Well, the attorneys I met in downtown LA didn't look very happy. And as a young, college student, I just thought, I think I want to be happier than they look.
Oh, that's great.
So luckily during UCLA years, I was working for IBM in downtown as a college student.
But doing techie things or doing?
No, not techie things, administrative things. I was in accounts receivable. So I was calling actually businesses in Arizona asking, have you mailed your payment for your mainframe system that you're leasing from IBM? So that was my first job. And that got me really into the corporate world and really appreciating kind of the corporate culture.
And you became very excelled in that corporate culture.
Well, I did my best.
Well, in your best was plenty good because you became a project manager for PetSmart.
Well, I worked at IBM. I worked at Nestle USA headquarters. Then with the internet boom, I went to work for Earthlink to launch DSL. Remember DSL?
Yes.
The cable came out.
not PetSmart. Where was I thinking that?
That was Earthlink. And then I went on to Charles Schwab, and PetSmart was the most recent employment I had.
There was a PetSmart.
So in all those years, I've learned a great deal from corporate America, and that's how my career progressed.
Listen, we're going to take a short break now. You're listening to a tribute to Korean War veterans, and this is Vets on Media and the Veterans Heritage Hour. We'll be back in about 5 or 3 or 2 minutes.
Would you like to own a thriving business and help employ local veterans? The Vetraplex Handyman Construction and Landscape business is the opportunity you've been waiting for. The Vetraplex is your gateway to an affordable startup business with 0% financing for qualifying owners. By owning a Vetraplex franchise, you will be hiring veterans, providing them both income and opportunity, while at the same time providing your customers a way to say, thank you for your service to our nation's veterans. For more information, visit vetraplex.org. Again, that's vetraplex.org or call 928-284-2022.
Break a 19. How about that bandit? You got some ears on, son?
Have you ever wanted to be a truck driver? If so, pay attention. If not, pay attention anyway. Southwest Truck Driver Training offers everything you need to get started. You can get hired before you begin training. They've got GI Bill approved training facilities, day, night, or weekend programs to fit your busy schedule. And if you have any questions, no sweat. They've got veteran supportive campuses with veterans on staff to serve you. And on top of that, they have lifetime job placement assistance. Put the pedal to the metal. Call Southwest Truck Driver Training today.
Everyone's going to need an attorney at some point in their life. I'm no different. Hey everyone, it's James from Vets On. Whether it was my last will and testament before deployment or my ongoing custody battle for my children during my divorce, I needed help, so I lawyered up. If you need help, I urge you to contact Capstrom Law Firm. Capstrom Law Firm in Springfield, Missouri services clients throughout the state in criminal law, personal injury, and family law. With over 13 years practicing law, Tom Capstrom understands both law and court procedures and how stressful they can be. Let Tom Capstrom Law Firm and his dedicated staff take the stress and worry out of a difficult situation by calling him today. We feel so strong about the work that Tom and his staff are doing that he'll be a monthly guest on the show. Tom is a veteran and a listener, for God's sake, so you know the guy is solid and will fight for you. Give Tom a call today by calling 417-864-0552 or email Tom at capstromlaw.com. And don't forget to tell him that Vets On sent you.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertising.
If you or someone you know is looking for a new job or career, you need to visit the pros. National Career Fairs at ncfairs.com. National Career Fairs hosts over 300 career fairs a year nationwide. The events are free and give you the perfect chance to meet some of the top employers in your area face-to-face. To find the nearest career fair to you, visit ncfairs.com. Again, that's ncfairs.com. What are you waiting for?
You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour on the Vets On Media Network.
Welcome back to the Veterans Heritage Hour. My guests today are Susan Key and Dr. Sung Lee, Korean Americans who are here to say the most absolute precious words that any man in a uniform or woman in a uniform wants to hear is thank you. Thank you from those we have helped liberate. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing for all of us to have heard? Thank you not only for your service, but thank you for liberating me. So Susan Key, take it away. Tell us about your book and why you're writing it and why you're devoting so much time.
Right. So I left corporate America because really I did not feel fulfilled. I didn't feel that my work was meaningful, and I wanted to make a difference in the world and give back in some way. And I've always wanted to write books. I didn't know how to go about it or how that was going to happen. So I left corporate America with just the intent of focusing on some soul searching and a lot of prayer. And after the end of that, I felt strongly that I should write about what I'm most grateful for. And of course, I'm most grateful for the freedoms that have been given to me. And what I was dumbfounded by was that I've lived most of my life very self-centered, on my own successes, work, school, whatever it was. And I had never thought or given thought to those who fought to give me the freedoms I am able to enjoy today. And I was embarrassed. It took me 46 years to realize that I have this huge debt of gratitude to America and its Korean War veterans here. And I felt so compelled to find them and look for them and to thank them. And I just felt, well, it's a little late, but it's never too late. I'm going to find them wherever they are and find out hopefully there are still a lot of them left. So that started my journey of looking for Korean War veterans. And as I talked to them and expressed my thanks to them, they were so genuinely warm and welcoming of me. And I just thought, boy, why didn't I do this earlier? And I decided that I wanted to pay tribute to them and to make sure that America and Korea never forgot the Korean veterans who served. So I asked the veterans for their stories. I told them I would like to try writing a book. I haven't ever done this before. I'm kind of a novice, but would they trust me with their stories? And so many of them came up to me to share photos, books they've read, their own experiences. It was just a wonderful flooding of information. And I really do believe that veterans are the best teachers of history because they lived it. They're not ones who write about it or research it afterwards. They lived it. They lived in that moment. So really, apart from everything I've studied, even in UCLA for political science, I did write a book, not a book, but a paper on Korean War. That pales in comparison to what I'm learning from our veterans today. So it has been an amazing journey of just love and friendship with these veterans who are willing to give me so much and invest so much of what they know to help me to tell their story. So my book will be very different, I hope, because as I did some research for my book, I found out two things. One, that most Korean War books are written by men, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's very natural because most of them fought there. The second thing is it looks at war from the outside, meaning strategy, wars, battles, fighting. But as a woman and somebody who likes personal stories, I wanted to see from the inside what these men were like, these young men who went to Korea. What kind of lives did they have? How did they grow up? How did the war impact them? How did the war change them? And what kind of lives did they lead? And what are they like today? You know, those were the questions I had when I first started to seek out Korean War veterans. So I think there must be some curiosity in the general public about where are these Korean War veterans and what are they like on the inside, you know, inside that uniform?
It was kind of a forgotten war here in America and maybe still is. And so thank you for paying tribute to them.
Right. So in my book, I have a range of veterans. I have ones that were prisoners of war that were captured during battles, dragged to North Korean prison camps along the Yalu River, which is at the border of China and North Korea, just endured horrific things, torture, starvation, brainwashing, all kinds of things. I also have a story of a veteran who is still considered missing. He was a fighter pilot, flew a P-51 Mustang, and was shot down on June 1st, 1950. And he is still considered missing. Then I have a lot of veteran stories of veterans who served on the front lines as well as in the rear, because I wanted to show the full breadth of the war and what it really takes in terms of people doing different kinds of duties in the military to, you know, participate in war. And I wanted to show the importance of people in the rear as well. A prime example of that is a firefighter. He is a fire chief of U.S. Army, and he was the only firefighting chief that was assigned to Korea. And his job was to protect Busan, where all the refugees were and all the supplies came in to fuel and support our guys in the front. So he had a very important job, and there was a huge fire at the winter of 1953. And he and his guys protected 3 million people that were down in Busan at that time of the war. So, you know, those kinds of stories are very powerful in that in different ways, whatever your duties are in the military, you have an important job to protect people. So that's another inspiring story. So anyways, I thought that I would write a very personal perspective to the Korean War because I wanted to reach a greater audience. Not enough people know about the Korean War, whether it's Americans or Koreans. And so I thought the way to reach most of them is to just tell a personal story that they can relate to. So if they can relate to the veteran, then through the veteran story, they will learn history because that veteran was there at that time.
And that's the very nature of the Veterans Heritage Project. That's how we became an organization. That's why Barbara Hedge started this.
That's right. So I do believe in the power of personal stories to teach. history and to develop a level of curiosity. So I really hope that's what happens with my book. And I hope to really cause people to see the heart of the soldier inside that uniform and to see the personal side of what they did, as well as their kindness and their compassion. So really my book is about courage and compassion of our Korean War veterans.
Did you not, there was a ceremony that you recently orchestrated where
Yes.
you honored Korean War veterans with the ambassador to the United States from Korea. Can you explain that? Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I'll make it really brief. The Korean consulate in Los Angeles contacted me early last year in hopes of awarding the Ambassador for Peace Medal to our Korean War veterans in Arizona. So long story short, the Korean government also sent delegates from the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs. They're the ones that produced this beautiful book called Korea Reborn. And they came out with their delegates to award the Ambassador for Peace Medal. So we had about 450 Korean War veterans who were in country, served in country in Korea, that received these medals. And it was a marvelous event because it was one of the largest gatherings we've had in Arizona of those that served in the Korean War. And it was just a beautiful day. And I hope the veterans will always remember that very
We've heard
special
nothing
day.
but great things about those who participated or changed. You really made their day.
Well, you know, it took a lot of people. And so I was very honored, and I'm so blessed to be part of this amazing journey of thanking veterans.
And you were also in Korea with veterans, were you not?
Yes.
How was that? Can you tell us just a few words about that? That's
Well,
an amazing
I went in September of 2013. With 10 of Arizona's Korean War veterans to Korea. There is a program called Korea Revisit Program. It is a sponsored program by the Korean Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs. Again, I feel like I'm giving them a lot of plugs, but they do a lot.
You absolutely should.
They do a lot. And so they asked veterans to come to Korea to be honored and thanked for their service in the Korean War. So it's a week-long program where the veterans get to go visit places like the DMZ, the Korean War Memorial, various places like the Incheon, where the Incheon landing took place. So it was a marvelous trip because it was an opportunity for me to see firsthand what the reaction of our veterans are after returning 63 years later to a country that was just in rubbles. And I think the very first reaction I saw was at the Incheon airport, the beautiful airport we have there now. And the veterans' jaws just dropped open, and they couldn't believe this
American
was the
veterans.
same. Yes, the American veterans, as they landed there and looked around, they just could not believe the transformation, that this could be the same Korea they served in over 63 years ago. Now, of course, they follow the news and they know that Korea has developed and become very modern, but it's a whole nother thing to experience it. And I think that's what I saw, is the experience of them going back to see the fruits and the legacy of their service.
Well, they experienced a war, and now they're coming back and they're experiencing a country.
That's right.
Exactly.
Two
That's
totally
right.
different
Right.
perspectives,
Right.
and a wonderful perspective. I had the same experience, different country, different time, but I
Right.
too went back to Vietnam,
Mhm.
and it was just amazing. My first reaction was, "Oh my goodness, this is a place
Right.
and not a war."
Right.
Didn't you see, wasn't there a U.S. Marine meeting a Korean
Right.
Marine?
I'll tell you a real brief story, really touching. We were at Incheon for a huge commemoration of the Incheon landing. So they brought out all the, Navy and amphibious gear and reenacted it. And we had some U.S. Marine Corps guys from North Carolina that had flown for this exercise. So it was really impressive. And one of the highlights was they rolled out the red carpet, and our Korean War veterans were literally escorted by a Korean young student in like a hero's welcome. I mean, this was better than Hollywood,
Sure.
red carpet. And it was just amazing. But what happened after the ceremony was even more beautiful. I was walking back to the bus with one of our veterans who had made the Incheon landing 63 years
Wow.
before. He actually had been there. And we were walking back to the bus, and a Korean Marine, an elderly gentleman, came up to us and asked, was he part of the Incheon landing? And I said, yes, he was. And he was totally overcome, and he was just filled with tears, and he bowed in gratitude to our veteran. And then he took a pin from his shirt and pinned it on my veteran. And he said, "Thank you for loving Korea, and please always love Korea." And at that moment, my veteran just broke up in tears. And he's a tough guy. He never showed tears in front of me before.
Mhm.
And that was the most beautiful thing. So for my veteran, I think getting pinned by another brother who had fought the same war was more meaningful than all the fanfare of that day. And it was really beautiful.
That is so special to hear. Yes, I hope all the Korean War veterans feel that as if they were there getting that pin on, because they certainly deserve it, all they can get. I know that we're celebrating the Korean War veterans who fought in that war, but we have put thousands and thousands of troops up on that DMZ.
Mhm.
And my buddy Richie Tomulski, my battery mate, my catcher, I was a pitcher in college, and he said to me one time, "Gosh, everybody gets thanked for their service for being in Vietnam and other wars," but he said, "Gosh, it was a dangerous place, the DMZ. So protecting Korea and all the veterans who served in, I think it was the 2nd Infantry Division, all those years up on that DMZ, and there's been shootings and shellings back and forth. Often it goes unreported because they're trying to keep the lid on it, but it's a dangerous place." So for Richie T in particular, and for all the other veterans who were up on that DMZ, keeping they were on the fence, so to speak. What is that line from that great movie? You want me out there on that line. And so, boy, our Americans have been up there for what, 60 years now. It's incredible.
Yes,
But
and
Korea is now a marvelous place and a marvelous economy. The citizens are great. The Korean Americans are wonderful. I mean, it's a tribute to the forces for good in the world, the forces that, who would want to be the contrast between North Korea and South Korea? I mean, North Korea in the civilized world, or these archaic countries that are now manifest in ISIS and other places, Belarus, and these crazy places. I mean, in this 21st century, it's almost unreal or surreal that people like that exist still, and we can't break free of them. There's just, is it human nature? Are we destined to always have this? And if we're destined to always have that, then we're going to be destined to always have people as courageous as the Korean War veterans to take these guys on. And hopefully we have the political leadership in the country here to recognize what is in our interest and what's in the world interest. But sharing those stories is certainly powerful. Thank you, Susan Key.
You're very welcome.
We're going to move next over when we come back from the break in a short minute, but we're going to move over to Dr. Soong Lee. And I just want to tease you a little bit about this man, because he has a degree in history from Brown University. He has a master's degree from Cambridge. He has a medical degree. He worked at Cornell University Wheel Center. I'm fogging up on my glasses here. Correct me. He was at Cornell, and he was also at Yale University, New Haven Hospital, and Yale. And so Dr. Soong Lee is now involved with this wonderful treatment that we feel is in a wonderful study being conducted for special operations troops, Green Berets, if you will, out of Fort Bragg. And he wants to talk about the study and its efficacy for the treatment of traumatic brain injury and combat stress. And you will be talking more about that, right, Dr. Lee?
Yes. Thanks, Joe.
How did you get involved in this aspect of? I know your background is studying the human brain, is it not?
So I have a background in internal medicine. That was the residency I chose after graduating from medical school. At the same time, I had always had an interest in different ways that people can use to support their own inside out kind of healing and recovery, kind of along the lines that Susan was mentioned, instead of thinking of things just from the outside in, which is kind of the medical approach, or the kind of the war on disease approach, if you will. What about seeing what we can do from the inside out? How can we support people and their organs and their brains to recover from the inside out? So I had looked at different kinds of methods, including meditation, yoga, acupuncture, other things that are sometimes called complementary or integrative interventions. And it was about 2008 that I discovered a particular method based on using brain waves, converting brain waves into sound, and allowing a person to hear the sound of their own brain waves. So this is a technology that was developed by Lee Gerdes. That's the book here that's on your table. He founded a company in 2004 called Brain State Technologies, and he had used this method. He created it from his own suffering. In the 90s, he had suffered a TBI and his own PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And he spent, by his recollection, about 8 years trying to come out from underneath it, trying everything, standard medical therapies and other approaches. Nothing could work. So finally, he took his matters into his own hands, if you will, and he was a data pattern specialist. He had always had interest in patterns and software analysis of patterns. So he started looking at his own brain patterns using simple equipment to look at brain electrical activity. And what he found was that when he was feeling better, his brain tended to be more balanced, the left and the right sides. When he was feeling worse, it tended to be more imbalanced. So he discovered this after doing this about 30 times, he tells me. And also being an audiophile and someone who always enjoyed music and an engineer and a tinkerer in the great tradition of tinkerers, he said, well, is there some way I can use sound, which is frequencies? I'm looking at brain frequencies and sound is frequencies. Can I use sound as a way to coax, if you will, my brain to come to that balance state where I tend to feel better? And he did that, and sure enough, it worked. And it worked quickly, and it worked in all kinds of ways he didn't expect. And that, after 2000, was why in a few years he founded a company in 2004 based on this technology.
So how did you, as a medical doctor, find this in your search for
Yes, and so when you're looking for ways to heal from the inside out, you're tending to be open to all kinds of possibilities, and you're kind of being an out-of-the-box thinker, if you will. And so, as I mentioned, I had looked at meditation and yoga and many techniques, and I had experienced many of them myself. And because people knew of my interests, they would often let me know about things. And actually, a friend and neighbor of mine let me know about this particular technique, this brainwave focus technique. And it just encouraged me to check it out. And I was already living in Arizona at the time, and the company's based here in Arizona. And I did check it out. And I quickly saw and experienced and discerned that this was very different. This is a different way to support people to recover from the effects of stress and trauma. And so in 2008, I started working with Lee and the company in various ways. In 2010, we started doing research. And it's been a very fast forward since then. So for the last 4 years, we have been working very closely with Wake Forest School of Medicine. There's a professor of neurology there, Dr. Charles Tegler, and he's been working with us in an academic industry collaboration to conduct clinical studies on health effects associated with this kind of inside-out approach to recovery. So that work has blossomed in all kinds of wonderful ways. At this point, Dr. Tegler actually has been funded by the Department of Defense, the Special Operations Command, to see what kinds of outcomes can be shown when this approach is used for individuals who've had post-traumatic stress symptoms related to the recent conflicts in the Middle East. So he has an open study right now, actively enrolling, looking for individuals, men or women, who've been in military service in the last conflict since 2001, who have any kind of, essentially any kind of issues, really, from having been deployed: sleep, difficulties with mood or attention, or just difficulty integrating themselves back into society. So we don't have to put labels on anything. Actually, we don't care for labels. It's just not necessary. People live their lives, right? And so if people are not feeling right, that they're not integrating into their lives after that kind of service, then they can call Wake Forest, Dr. Tegler, and we can share that information with you, Joe, and they can see if they're eligible to enroll in that study.
We hope to have this advertisement, or this solicitation, I guess you would say, this invitation is a better word, this invitation for veterans to go to Wake Forest free, essentially. I mean, their treatment is going to be, their lodging and everything's going to be covered. And we're looking for volunteers to go and help the team here. David and I, we'll get into this after the break, but David and I manned up a little bit and took this on to make sure that nobody could get hurt, essentially, and we found out it was marvelous. But Dr. Tegler, we met Dr. Tegler, who was conducting the study, and he said when he first found out about this, he said, no way. So he was skeptical until he himself tried this. And so I know Susan was talking about the Korean War veterans, and my buddy John Woodward here, he's devoted a lot of his lifetime to healing himself and other people. And he works at the VA, and he knows about PTS and the stress from combat, and it's ageless, believe me. It stays with you a lifetime, and it can be treated at any time in your life as well. So you mentioned that some of your Korean War veterans
Well, as they talked to me about their stories, many of them told me they've never told anyone
Yes.
these stories. And the reason for that is that when they came back from the war, most people didn't even know Korean War was going on.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were asked, where were you? And so that made them clam up, and they kept everything in. And a lot of them did exhibit signs of PTSD as we know it today. But at that time, it wasn't identified. It wasn't treated. So these veterans are just now starting to open up. So they've lived it with this for most of their life.
I know. And if there's anything we can do, us older vets, and I think David and I are here to do that today, is to say, listen, there's help.
And it's never too late.
And it's never too late. And my buddy John is working on this, and he's the guy who got me help. He, said to my fiance at the time, get Joe to get in. I said, get in where? And I got an interesting story. We taking a break here somewhere? Anytime? Right now? Well, hey, we're going to take a break. I was just informed. This is a Veterans Heritage Hour, and we'll be right back.
Everyone's going to need an attorney at some point in their life. I'm no different. Hey, everyone, it's James from Vets On. Whether it was my last will and testament before deployment or my ongoing custody battle for my children during my divorce, I needed help, so I lawyered up. If you need help, I urge you to contact Capstrom Law Firm. Capstrom Law Firm in Springfield, Missouri services clients throughout the state in criminal law, personal injury, and family law. With over 13 years practicing law, Tom Capstrom understands both law and court procedures and how stressful they can be. Let Tom Capstrom Law Firm and his dedicated staff take the stress and worry out of a difficult situation by calling him today. We feel so strong about the work that Tom and his staff are doing that he'll be a monthly guest on the show. Tom is a veteran and a listener, for God's sake, so you know the guy is solid and will fight for you. Give Tom a call today by calling 417-864-0552 or email Tom at capstromlaw.com. And don't forget to tell him that Vets On sent you.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertising.
Breaker, 1-9. How about that bandit? You got them ears on, son?
Have you ever wanted to be a truck driver? If so, pay attention. If not, pay attention anyway. Southwest Truck Driver Training offers everything you need to get started. You can get hired before you begin training. They've got GI Bill approved training facilities, day, night, or weekend programs to fit your busy schedule. And if you have any questions, no sweat. They've got veteran supportive campuses with veterans on staff to serve you. And on top of that, they have lifetime job placement assistance. Put the pedal to the metal. Call Southwest Truck Driver Training today.
If you or someone you know is looking for a new job or career, you need to visit the pros. National Career Fairs at ncfairs.com. National Career Fairs hosts over 300 career fairs a year nationwide. The events are free and give you the perfect chance to meet some of the top employers in your area face-to-face. To find the nearest career fair to you, visit ncfairs.com. Again, that's ncfairs.com. What are you waiting for?
Would you like to own a thriving business and help employ local veterans? The Vetraplex handyman construction and landscape business is the opportunity you've been waiting for. The Vetraplex is your gateway to an affordable startup business with 0% financing for qualifying owners. By owning a Vetraplex franchise, you will be hiring veterans, providing them both income and opportunity, while at the same time providing your customers a way to say, thank you for your service to our nation's veterans. For more information, visit vetraplex.org. Again, that's vetraplex.org or call 928-284-2022.
You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour on the Vets On Media Network.
Welcome back to the Veterans Heritage Hour. We're talking with Susan Key, Dr. Sung Lee, and my old pal, David Lucer, Special Forces member of the Armed Forces. Just before, we're talking about PTSD and some treatments, and I just want to acknowledge that my friend John Woodward, a Korean War veteran, asked my girlfriend at the time, hey, Corey, why don't you get Joe to see somebody? And so I had some issues on the golf course. My anger was coming out with like a 7-iron would leave my hand and helicopter around. And it was a little embarrassing because my wife now is a freelance golf travel writer. So I went to Prescott, Arizona, and I met a guy by the name of Al Hoster who worked at the Vet Center. And Al was a dust-off pilot. And I thought nothing was wrong with me. I had the bluster and the bravado and everything. And so I said, geez, my friend and my girlfriend think I might need some help. But I think everything's fine. I don't deserve it. I don't, I didn't do anything spectacular. I don't, whatever this is, but I just want a little checkout to see if I'm overlooking something, right? And so I says, besides, if you can't help me break 80, I'll kill you, right? Thinking he would get the joke. And he saw right through me, and it turns out he provided an awful lot of help. So we're here to encourage people to get a debriefing. I always tell people, like coming after combat or something, get a debriefing by somebody who you can talk to, because it's great to get this thing under control early on in your life. Deal with it, because you have a precious life ahead of you. Get this out of the way. It's treatable. You can work with it. And Dr. Lee has a non-invasive, no pill, no therapy, talk therapy. It's yourself, healing yourself essentially. And David and I went through it. David, you're a special forces guy.
Well, the analogy that I use and have come up with and just recently is we're asked to go swimming, but then we don't expect to get wet.
Uh-huh.
And so it's one of those things that's really impossible to do one without incurring a condition of the other. And I think that's just, I don't think that people have looked at it like that. It was, well, you just man up, you can get through it. All those kinds of cliches that we've heard over the years. You've heard it, Joe. Certainly I've heard it a lot. I've seen it. I work with a lot of veterans now, student veterans, older veterans, really veterans across the age continuum. And it takes about 2 seconds to figure it out.
Yeah. And you're a medic. You're a special forces medic, trained medic.
I was. It's been a long time since I ever picked up a scalpel.
Yeah, but you have a background in this type of mental.
But I do,
health.
and that's been helpful.
Sure.
But like you, I've been encouraged over the years to talk to someone. No, I don't. But then it occurred to me that I did go swimming and I got wet. And so that's kind of the analogy that I continue to use. And that helps, I think, people understand. But then, of course, the next step is what next? And
that's Dr. Lee. So
that's Dr. Lee.
So the treatment then, and I like your statement, talk about the non-invasive methodology here of the person healing themselves or herself.
Sure. Thank you, Joe. And I'm just going to speak very briefly because I know that you're going to have Susan close this up. But basically, it's a very simple way to put sensors on the scalp. Brain activity is read from those sensors. Computer analyzes that brain activity and translates brain frequencies into sound, into tones. So again, you're just essentially listening to your own brain music. And by having this updated information about your own brain activity, the brain gets the message underneath. Those waves underneath that we've been swimming in, if you will, that have been disrupted, those disturbed waves, they tend to work themselves out. So these systematic imbalances between the left and the right sides of the brain in particular, where the right might be more dominant and we might have a sort of fight or flight response, or the left may be dominant, we may have a kind of a freeze response. That's one way that kind of imbalance can show up. Those kinds of imbalances, they tend to work themselves out and people start to feel better in ways that they didn't even expect.
And in layman terms, real quickly, it's non-invasive, and so you're not poked or prodded.
Right.
You sit in a nice, comfortable chair, and someone assists you with the sound nodes. Very easy. I mean, Joe and I both went through it, and we were very, very pleased with the results.
And there's no pill and there's no therapy and there's nobody to claim that, there's nothing to tell anybody about. You didn't go through any therapy session. You didn't take a pill. You're not on any medication. It's you helping you.
You don't have to go through the torturous process of reliving.
Yeah. And so we're asking veterans to help themselves. And Susan, can you take us out with a kind word for our Korean War veterans?
Yes, of course. If there are Korean War veterans listening out there, as I know there will be, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Everything that I have, the life I've been able to live, is because of your service. And I thank you for the most precious gift you have given me, the gift of freedom. So I hope you are very proud as you think about your service and the legacy you have left behind of a country that is prosperous and one of the 10th largest economies in the world. Not many veterans can say that's what they achieved through their service. So I thank you for saving millions of Koreans like me and saving my country. And you will always be our greatest heroes to us Koreans. I also want to speak to the families of killed in action and missing in action. I have had the privilege of meeting many families out there of missing in action Korean War veterans. To you, I give you my most profound sorrow and also deepest gratitude. You have made the ultimate sacrifice to save Korea. And so I thank you for your sacrifice and for the sacrifice that gave us the freedoms that we have. And also, I want to speak to the many generations of Americans who have served at the DMZ and also in various parts of Korea. This is a legacy of the American military, that they continue to defend the freedom of others. And Korea is a prime example of the continued presence and the continued support the American military gives to Korea to defend it. So I want to thank all those that are serving in Korea, that have served in Korea to protect what our veterans sacrificed and died for. So I am so grateful to this country for giving me everything that I've had. And I want to give back by honoring our Korean War veterans and making sure that their legacy and their service is not forgotten. So please stay tuned into the progress of my book, and I hope to release it this year. So God bless you, and I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Amen, Susan. Thank you so much, and Je suis Kayla. This is the Veterans Heritage Hour, and next week our guest will be Dr. Kyle Longley, a PhD professor at ASU, and he has 2 books on Vietnam, and he has the most revealing story about declassified documents from the LBJ Library. So stay tuned next week, and thank you so much, our guest today. You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour.
And bright stars through the